Hello and welcome everybody to our session 3 with the amazing Zoe Routh, and it's been such a privilege to have Zoe with us, and my apologies for not being able to make it last week, but I heard you're in the good hands of our CEO Mark, who supported Zoe, so hopefully he behaved himself. I heard it was successful, so that's always good. I'd love to hand it over to Zoe, and just before I do that, I would just like to remind you all that you would have been sent workbook number 3. I'm also going to post it in the chat just in case you didn't, for whatever reason, receive that. Yeah, and we've worked out now how to do the recordings quite quickly, so you'll get the recording in your inbox probably tomorrow morning, which will be great. So Zoe, without any further ado, I'd love to hand over to you. Give you the reins.
Thank you. And there was thunderous applause. Well, welcome everybody to session number 3 in Secrets of Elite Executive Teams. I am very happy to be here, and I'm feeling a little feisty today, so you never know what's going to come out of my mouth. So, well, I know what's going to come out of my mouth mostly. So look out for any faux pas, because that can be a dangerous thing when I'm a little fired up like I am today. First of all, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I stand, which is the beautiful Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And to celebrate, yeah, it's a good place to be anywhere in Australia, really. So I pay my respects. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? We are going to look at the key capabilities you need as a leader to shift from being an achiever to an amplifier. And this is going to step change. Well, it's going to be a step change with exponential results for you. So the focus is on you, the leader. So exciting. And I get really fired up when I talk about this, because without leaders, nothing. And my whole raison d'etre, my whole point of being is to support leaders who are brave enough, courageous enough to put their hand up and say, okay, I'll have a go. And you, my friends, are it. So I'm so excited to share this with you. We're going to talk about troubleshooting. This is talking about you and your team. So when things go pear-shaped, what do you do? And lastly, we're going to talk about how to keep the vibe alive. So how can you get back into that fun place when things are going? I also want to acknowledge everybody who's in lockdown and try and give you as much energy as possible to lift your spirits, because most of the time it ain't no fun. And certainly if you don't have the choice about it, it ain't no fun. So my heart goes out to you, and also to the people across the ditch in New Zealand. Welcome. It's nice to have you here as well. All righty. So a little bit of a recap. Welcome. This is where we've been over the last 3 weeks. So we had a welcome. We looked at the overarching journey of how to go from wherever you are, whether it's a novice team, a star team, and amateurs into the elite space. And we talked about the 2 things that you need to do: building culture cohesion, as well as developing leadership capability. So those 2 factors help drive us towards elite. And then last week, we looked at the nuts and bolts of that. Ta-da! Which is your bicycle of high performance, where you have purpose as your front wheel, results as your trailing wheel, and structure, strengths, and speaking up as the 3 cogs in the middle, gears that help build the momentum and produce the amazing stuff of collaboration, engagement, and innovation. So that's the nuts and bolts. We sent you a checklist afterwards, so you can double check the minutia and detail of that. So moving into today, let's talk about CEOs. It substitutes CEO for head of team. And I want you to do 2 things. First of all, as a team leader or as a CEO, I want you to identify which superpower you'd love to have as a team leader, if you could have any superpower. Any superpower. And if you put that in the chat box, that would be really cool. As you're doing that, one of my promises today is that I'm going to give you a technique to gift you with a superpower of presence. That's what we're heading towards a little bit later on in the session today. So what superpower would you love to have as a team leader? Come on. I love to hear true confessions. X-ray vision, flying, speaking underwater, I don't know, but it would be good to know. So that's the first thing I want you to have a think about as CEO. Mind reading. Liam, I can't teach you exactly how to mind read, but the framework that we're going to cover today about how to troubleshoot is almost that. So it's a map that can help you see a little bit under the surface of what's going on for folks. Deb Evans wants quiet focus as a superpower. Yeah, I'd like to dial down the chatter in my brain, have that dialed down so I could have more quiet focus in my own brain. Megan says, being able to keep everyone positive. Oh, yeah, right. So I think that's an interesting one because we don't have control over that. We don't have control over how people see the world and therefore how they experience it and how they feel about it. All we have is ourselves. And yet, as leaders, we are so incredibly influential. How we show up, how we communicate, how we engage has a massive impact on an organization. So my next question for you, and Marie says, superpower, listen and think at the same time. That would be good because they're two different channels, aren't they? So my second question for you, thinking about how much influence we show up as the team leader, because as we show up, it's like a megaphone blasting out there amongst the people. What percentage do you think a CEO in particular has on the outcome of an organization's performance? So from 0 to 100%, thinking about the CEO, and then you could also substitute that on outcome for your team. What percentage does the CEO have in terms of influence over the results? Anywhere from 0 to 100? Have your best guess and pop it into the chat box. Okay. We've got 80%. We've got 80%. Do I hear any other bits? Any other bits? 90, 70, 70. Okay, well, let me tell you what the research says. And this is an amazing piece of research. And the research shows that, let me just see who did the research. Do I have that here? Yes, Alison Mackey in The Effect of CEOs on Firm Performance, 2020, so very current research. She worked out that the CEO can have an impact of, drum roll, 29%. And maybe it was the way that I hammed it up or amped it up before I asked you the question that led you to put a really top notch in there. But whether you put 80% or not, 29%, a third essentially of an organization's results come down to the leader and how they are showing up and what they are doing, saying, and being. That's still huge, right? Like you think about an organization of 1,000 people, one person responsible really for 30% of the results. That's pretty exciting and intimidating at the same time. So this comes to a really important concept that Cindy Wigglesworth, who is the author of SQ21, the 21 Skills of Spiritual Intelligence, which is all about advanced emotional intelligence. She says the capacity of the organization is limited by the capacity of the leader. So just in case you needed a little bit more pressure, pressure on you and in your basket, the whole organizational capacity is dependent on the leader's capacity. What does that actually mean? It means our ability to think effectively and deeply, our ability to take effective action, and the quality of our energy has a massive impact on the organization itself. So if the leader is not growing and expanding, neither is the organization. And perhaps you've been in an organization or observed one where you know that to be true, where the leader is just doing the same thing day in, day out. There's nothing new, there's nothing innovative, they're not pushing the boundaries, they're not learning more. They just want to keep steady as she goes, just maintain the status quo. And so that organization, especially in our current context of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, VUCA, and exponential world, doesn't wash. We cannot just maintain the status quo as organizations and not as leaders. So it's over to us as leaders to kind of stretch and push and explore and think about new ways of being and thinking and doing. I'm going to share a couple of those with you today. All right. So there is pushback or questions, not necessarily pushback from Marie. 29%. How come when a leader changes an organization can sometimes really plummet or excel? So yeah, it's still a third percent. 30% is still a third of the organization results. So I think it's a simple statistic in some ways, right? So organizations are complex entities, and the CEO is one part of the system. And so them going out or coming in can have a leveraged effect on the system. That's all about systems thinking, and either a negative or a positive effect. So direct impact, 30%, whole of system effect may be greater in the ripple context. Thank you for raising that point. All right, so the capacity of the organization is limited by the capacity of the leader. Okay, so a bit of pressure on. Next question for you in the chat box is, why is leadership so hard? And I would wager a bet that most leaders find leadership hard from time to time. And there's different factors for that. I want to know why it's hard for you potentially, or it has been hard for you. Maybe you find it easy peasy now, I'm not sure. So why is leadership so hard? Let's get your input into the chat box now around that. And then I'll give you some of the reasons why I think it's so hard and what my clients have been telling me why it's so hard. It's never ending. That's right. It doesn't sort of end at the door, does it? You like close the door behind you when we used to go into offices and then you're done. It's kind of like, oh, it's 24/7. It's never ending. There's always one thing after another. Megan says the capacity to respond to the demands is one of the reasons why it's so hard. You need a high emotional resilience. Yes, you do. And why is that? Why do we need high emotional resilience? Well, I was speaking to a leader today, and she feels like she's done the best job she can in terms of managing difficult transitions. And she's had to do a restructure, and she had a whole bunch of staff come in and complain about it. She's been really supportive of another staff member, giving her second, third, fourth chances, and finally that person's exiting. She's put everything on the table in terms of support and care and compassion, and still she gets criticized. Where is the cup getting filled for the CEO? And we'll talk a little bit about that later. It's one of our key responsibilities. All right, so capacity as well. Yeah, like how much can you hold in your bucket? And often we're holding too much in our bucket, and some of the things in our bucket shouldn't be in our bucket at all. They should be in somebody else's bucket. That's a different webinar. All right, so let me share a couple of things that I know to be true about why leadership is so hard. First one, and I think many of you will resonate with this, is that the spot fires take up all your time and energy. Maybe it's that relentless piece that Marie's talking about, or the high emotional resilience that Joe is talking about. So the constant never ending, like, you just deal with one staff member and then their issue is sorted, then you have somebody else's issue sorted. Well, when you think about it this way, right? So let's say you have a team of 12. Each person normally has potentially one big issue happening in their world in a 12-month period. Not unreasonable to expect, whether it's personal or professional. At least one major incident in personal or professional world. So you as a leader, if you have 12 team members, that means you're going to be dealing with a major issue at least once a month. If you have 12 team members, one per month. Hopefully you have one at a time, hopefully not 5 all at once, because that's like, huge dramas. So spot fires take up all our time and energy. So where do you get the chance to just press pause on everything to do the big picture thinking that you need to do? And that's one of the tensions we often struggle with as leaders. The second thing, and we're no strangers to this, is the constant volatility, the uncertainty, hello pandemic, the complexity of the situation we find ourselves, the ambiguous nature of it, and the exponential nature of the context in which we find ourselves. There's so much rapid change in technology and biotech, sometimes in government policy. It's really a scramble to keep up with that. So that's the second piece of why it's so hard. And the third one, and I think it speaks a little bit to what Joe says there, is the weight of responsibility. Like, people who step up into leadership roles generally have a strong purpose and sense of vision that they want to commit to. So the sense of responsibility and carriage for this vision and the people that are creating it alongside you goes rather deep. And so having to make difficult decisions in volatile, complex circumstances can weigh pretty heavily on our shoulders. We do feel responsible for people, though we shouldn't. We should feel responsible to them rather than for them. We are responsible for people under our care, such as children who cannot look after themselves. We aren't necessarily responsible for the mood and happiness of the people that we work with. That's their responsibility. Our responsibility to them, though, is to show up centered, composed, energetic, focused, stoic, to be both firm and fair, to be both generous and parsimonious, all these tensions that we have as leaders. That's our responsibility, to show up best version of ourselves so that we help create the space for others to be the best version of themselves. Ultimately, other people have their own choices about whether they're going to be happy or sad or frustrated or not. We do our best to create the context that allows them to thrive, their choice whether they thrive or not. And how we manage ourselves is a critical aspect of that. So let me show you a journey that you can go on. So the step change, which is really an exponential one for you as leaders. Right, share. She says squinting. It's hard, you get, you can't see everything with the glasses, but then you don't have the glasses and you can't see anything. All right. So the journey that we go on as leaders is when we first start out, we have a big picture vision. We're excited about where we're going and we want to make a difference. And then yet we may not necessarily have all the leadership skills, the influence skills in order to see the bigger picture, to execute on that and to bring people along for the ride. But we know that things need to change and want to change and we want to be part of it. And so we are really agitators. Maybe you remember you as a younger version of self is a bit like that. It's like, we can do so much more. And we just want to shout it from the rooftops. And maybe we did. And we realized that didn't get us that far. And we can't figure out why. So when we develop our leadership skills, our ability to influence, engage, and have emotional intelligence and bring a team together, and we extend our perspective so we understand the complexity and nuance of an organization, those two things combine. And when all of a sudden we're part of a team, we're managing teams, and we're making plans, we're kicking goals, and we're actually moving forward in a progressive way. Well, this is great. This is called being an achiever. Yeah, getting a plan together, executing with others, woohoo, scoring some goals, getting some results. If we then find ourselves, as we have done in the last 18 months, in a volatile, complex world, doing more of achiever won't necessarily help us contend with this current context because it's all changeable. Our nicely laid plans, our 12-month schedule of work, went up in a puff of smoke with lockdowns and yada, yada, yada. We've all lived through this. So we cannot continue to lead in the same way. Bringing in a new plan just because lockdown happened doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same plan next week, let alone next month. Forget about next year. So how do we do that? If we keep doing the same things the same way, we burn out and we become a fader. So the temptation at Achiever is just to work harder and longer. If we just work harder and longer doing the same stuff, we'll make our way through. And no, no, we need a new way of being and doing. We need to make a critical shift here. And the critical shift is to go to what I call amplifiers, become an amplifier. An amplifier is someone who can amplify the results and activities of other people around you. So it's not just about your task and your responsibilities, it's about everybody else around you so that you are elevating and building capacity amongst everybody amongst your team. And we talked a little bit about this in our first session on the journey to elite teams, where building the capability of the people around you is instrumental in developing elite high-performing teams. You cannot be the only star performer on your team. You stay in a linear context and get stuck. You actually need everybody to step up, and your responsibility is to do that. So the critical shift here needs three things. One is to build capability in the people around you and in yourself. And so in the second session, we talked about group flow, and that's one way to tap into some of your personal capability, as well as your team capability. The second critical shift that you need to make is to navigate complexity. So your ability to see all the different moving parts and how they influence each other is pretty important. And the third piece is to maximize energy. So getting into flow state is one element of that. And I'm going to teach you a couple of hacks today to help do exactly that. So something you can walk away practically to help boost your energy. And it's going to be instrumental for helping you move forward in your leadership experience. So what gets in the way of people making this shift? Bum, bum, bum. Oh, I'm not the priority. So we have this false sense of everybody else needs to be looked after first. So we invest our time and energy in building capability to people around us. Guess what? This is not a problem to solve. This is a polarity to manage, meaning you need to elevate people around you and build capability in yourself. I interviewed a leader last week on my podcast, Adam Moore, where he talks about this. And his main premise is to make himself redundant. And so he's never been afraid of building the people around him up so they could do his job. Because once he's doing that, he then realizes there's an open space for him to create something new and trust that whether it's a clearly visible path in terms of there's my next promotion or not, where there's not necessarily an obvious step for him in a role, say, for example, but more in like, what's the strategic contribution I can make to the organization? So I'm stretching myself. So he's doing two things at once. And I think all of us as leaders need to be doing that as well. How do we stretch the people around us and stretch ourselves? So there's this continual vacuum of people being sucked forward or expanded as we go along. So that's the first concern. I'm not the priority. Again, the capacity of the organization is limited by the capacity of the leader. So let's throw that concern out the window. The second one is, I don't have the time. I don't have the time to do this work. Well, maybe not. And this is the amazing thing though, we always find the time for the things that are important to us, right? So we find the time to get up and have a shower and eat daily because it's important. We find the time to exercise because it's important. We find the time to meditate because it's important. We find the time to say hello to the dog and pat the children because that's important. So out of all your priorities, this is one of the things that we need to put on there as well, developing of yourself. Okay, I feel like I've banged that drum fairly consistently now. So let's get into how do we help you do that? Well, this is all about getting your stuff together. Here's two resources. One is Composure, which is my first book. It's kind of a meta picture of you looking at yourself and seeing what journey you're on, making sense of it, and developing that deep inner knowingness that is your presence. And your presence has such a massive ripple effect. So this is a longer term resource. And The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kotler, which I mentioned, I think I mentioned that in the last webinar. If I didn't, well, I'm mentioning it now. And this is all about how to get into flow so you can access those peak states. Amazing book, highly recommended. All right, so getting your stuff together is the next thing. Let's look in greater detail about the shift. And this is in your notes. So the first part is think about your context. Going from achiever to amplifier is going from a linear context to an exponential one. So I spoke a little bit about that already. So no more 1 to 3 year timeframes. We are now in like, okay, what happens if things double? What happens if we have to deliver 10 times the results that we're currently doing? How do we manage that? The mindset is about being a goal getter versus an experimentalist. A goal getter is like, right, set a target, make a plan, go for it. Experimentalist is like, well, okay, well, let's create a little experiment here, see how it goes, get some intel about it, and adapt course or throw out that particular set piece of work. So it's iterative as opposed to, I don't know, what's the operative iterative? Black and white. The actions we take as achiever are reactive versus proactive. So being a linear person in a volatile context means that we're often being reactive and we want to be on the front foot. Our focus can often be at achiever about results only and instead of people first. And the last piece, achiever is very transactional. Set a plan, go for it, outcome. Amplifier is thinking about transformation. So this is the thing though, we don't want to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to take the best of achiever and bring it forward into the amplifier space. So this is really the art of and to make the shift, we need to develop perspective and people leadership skills. So we take everything that's good out of achiever and bring it with us and do this. So we need to do linear and exponential, goal getting and experiments. Being reactive, let's face it, there's always going to be parts of our work that's like that, and productive. Balancing results and people, transactional stuff as well as transformational stuff. That's a big, tall order. It can be a lot to keep in mind. So I'm just going to stop sharing there. So that's the journey. And I'm going to give you a couple more tips as we go along. I want to get into troubleshooting. So yeah, best laid plans. Let's be amplifiers. Let's work in the exponential land as well as deliver results. What happens when your team goes pear-shaped? What do we do about that? So this is what we want to do. We need to know the map so we can manage the people. And I talk about it a lot in people stuff. Dun, dun, dun. Some of you managed to get a copy of this already. I'm going to unpack the chapter called The 4 Devils of People Stuff, where we're going to look at the 4 P's and the 5 R's of dealing with the problematic stuff. To my handy dandy whiteboard. It's something I prepared earlier. Right, let me just see that I can get this closer. Low tech. Low tech is sometimes really good. Okay. So when we've got problems in our team, there's usually a couple things going on. It usually means that some survival button has been pushed. Some sort of trigger has caused people to go into what is called an amygdala hijack. And some of you may be familiar with this term. The amygdala is the almond-shaped organ at the base of your brainstem that is responsible for fight, flight, and freeze. It's our alarm bell system. And what happens is that when we walk into a new situation, or even an old situation, but has some different things happening in it, it can cause the amygdala to go, if it's a danger to us, then it causes the amygdala to go whoop, 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 send off alarm bells, and it floods our system with cortisol and adrenaline. So we're ready to fight or whoo, run away, or just conk out and play dead. So what happens when the amygdala does that is that we are so fired up with this energy. Our vision narrows into a tunnel vision, so we lose our sense of periphery, and we're just so mega focused on just dealing with this issue at hand. We lose access to our neocortex, so all the executive function of our brain just goes parked out to the side. We're in survival mode, which means it's very difficult to learn, very difficult to have stoic, emotionally intelligent conversations because we're just primed up for survival mode. We lose access to our short-term memory. So if you've ever been in a heated conversation and you walk out of it and you go, what just happened in there? Like, who said what? How did that work? That is the amygdala happening. So we want to avoid being an amygdala hijack at work. And yet sometimes we get triggered into that mode by stuff in our environment. And the work of the likes of Australian neuroscientists like David Rock have mapped out some of the contemporary triggers in the workplace that cause us to go into this particular unhelpful state. And it can happen to you and any one of your team members at any time. So when we have a map of that, we can start to understand how we can change some of our systems so that we can avoid some of these dramas. The big one to consider, though, is fear of loss. We don't like losing stuff. We're survival beings. So loss of something, even if we don't care about it, can cause us to go, get antsy. They've done some weird research on this, right? So you can have get gifted a $10 cup and it doesn't mean anything to you. It didn't pick anything up. Then all of a sudden someone wants to take it from you. You're like, hey, go, that's my cup. Really? Fear of losing is one of the main drivers. And in the workplace, there's 4 main losses that we are concerned about. The first one is, and it's the first P, is loss of power. And this little creature, not sure it comes up so clearly on the picture, is the firebug. And the firebug is the first of the 4 devils. The firebug is, you know them because they rant, they rave, they're furious, they're argumentative. They can be quite assertive, aggressive maybe. So they're all fired up. They're the firebug. And loss of power, control, and autonomy is some of the things that can push our buttons and cause us to appear as a firebug. So this is obviously a fight mechanism, this kind of firebug activity. And it can show up on your teams as turf wars, where people are vying for resources and struggling to get access to staff or access to your time or access to something. So territorialism, sure, that's a word. And definitely turf wars is a symptom of the firebug, as is the ranting and raving. So yeah, fun times. We'll talk about how to cure this in just a moment. The second P, Here's our little face is a storm driver. It's a cloud with an electrical bolt or lightning bolt coming out of it. The second P is loss of position. This means loss of position relative to others. So these are issues like status and fairness. So if you come in as a CEO and you say, oh, I'm going to change you guys around. I'm going to give you new titles. I'm going to give you new departments to manage, new areas of responsibility, and you don't consult. So you trigger off loss of power and autonomy. Nice. And then you change their title, and it's a title that feels diminutive or less than the one they had before. Woo! All of a sudden you have this unhelpful amygdala hijack trigger happening. It can trigger, it's quite an emotive thing, fairness and status. People are really sensitive to it. And even though like, I don't have status issues, we all have status issues. If you've ever had your expertise neglected in a or not neglected, maybe neglected, passed over, not heeded or listened to in a conversation, you know what I'm talking about, right? And it's like, I've had 30 years of experience in this. Why didn't they ask me? And it can really go, get all riled up. And it can happen in our personal worlds as well. So, I've confessed I'm Canadian, and I grew up in Winnipeg, which is a very wintry place. There's 6 months of winter in Winnipeg. So there's a lot of snow. Grew up in snow, played in snow, drove in snow. So I married an Australian. And one of the first times we went up to the snow here in Australia, I was amazed there was snow in Australia, by the way. We find ourselves, he's driving, and we're parking and trying to get out of the car park. And I'm like, right, honey. So what we need to do is dig out all the way to the ground so that we won't slip and slide. It's like, no. She'll be right. She'll be right. That Australian expression is so fantastic. And what does he do? I'm like, don't do it. So he slams into first gear, revs the engine high, and guess what? The wheels go, and as they're spinning, they go, the car gets stuck even more than it was. I'm like, don't do it again. I'm like, so we are getting stuck, and my temperature is rising and rising. I'm like, you didn't listen to me. I'm Canadian. I know about these things. I have driven in the snow. And then I realized, oh my God, I am having an amygdala hijack around being Canadian and having snow expertise. Then I breathe my way through it. I'm like, okay, just calm down. No need to get anxious about this. We had to dig out the car and get it pushed out. Well, we got out. And guess what? Who drives out of the car park every single time after this? So our personal world can get triggered by not having our experience and expertise considered. And we can get emotional. Sometimes it looks a little bit like firebug, like angry and frustrated. More often it's emotional. It's emotional tirade. And so the difference between firebug and storm driver is a little bit, the storm driver is hurt and harried, and the firebug is righteous and wronged. So hurt and harried means like we can be quite upset. You're in the presence of a storm driver if all you're experiencing is just overwhelming emotion. They're trying to talk through what's going on, but they're kind of talking in circles and emotional, and all you get is this blast of emotion. So that's the storm driver. The third P is loss of place. My little drawing here, not sure what it looks like, but it's supposed to be a wave crashing with a sad face, angry face. And this is the water bomber. So we have storm driver and water bomber. The water bomber is unlike either the firebug or the storm driver because their distress is not expressed verbally. It's expressed through their behavior. So the kind of angst that is expressed by the water bomber, it can show up in two different versions. The clam, where you ask someone, how are you? And they go, fine. And clearly they are not fine. They won't tell you. And the other version of that is the vampire that leaves a wake in their trail. They're kind of like, how are you? Oh, okay, I guess. And they carry off and they swan around, leaving this emotional wake behind them. That's why I call them the water bombers, kind of like, ugh. Both are difficult because it's hard to get to the bottom of what's really bothering them. The loss of place is often the trigger. So this is where our sense of inclusion and belonging gets triggered, or we feel left out or ostracized. and don't feel safe in the team. And this, because we don't feel safe, we can't speak up. And so this can make us feel very insecure and nervous and upset. And so that's one of the triggers that causes the water bomber. So that leaves our last one, which is our ground splitter. This is kind of like an earthquake symbol with a sad, angry face. So the ground splitter, what triggers them is loss of performance. Similar to the water bomber is that we can get overwhelmed or feel insecure about speaking up. So our behavior goes underground, which is why I call it the ground splitter. And we may end up doing things like back channel whispering, complaining behind the scenes, but not speaking outrightly. We might do some white anting. We might do some back channeling. This kind of underhanded behavior can also result in silos where it's like, I am just so swamped, I'm just going to do this and just deal with my own stuff. More benign version of the ground splitter as opposed to the corrosive behind the scenes experience. So yeah, not easy, not easy. So question for you in the chat box, let's do true confessions first, rather than going, oh yeah, I've got a water bomber and a firebug. Which one or ones have you found yourself in? Have you been a firebug, a storm driver, a ground splitter, or a water bomber? Let me know. Which P have you found yourself in? Loss of power is firebug. Loss of position is storm driver. Loss of place is water bomber. And loss of performance is the ground splitter. Let's see. Which one of you found yourself being maybe once upon a time? Don't even have to say currently. Storm driver, storm driving. Okay. Hurt and harried is the storm driver. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Ground splitter. True. I love true confessions. It's awesome. So when you put up the mirror, I go, yeah. Doesn't feel great, right? And mental hijacks are never a great place to be. So let's look at, storm driver and ground splitter. Okay, cool. Ground splitter, water bomber, water bomber. Where are the firebugs? No firebugs in this group. Okay, awesome. So let's talk about the antidotes, which is the 5 R's. So first of all, like there's the first aid response you have to do with your team in order to troubleshoot that. And the first aid response is they're triggered emotionally by the amygdala. So you need to basically meet with them, make sure that they can get into as calm a state as possible. No sense having a conversation when they're like emotionally upset or ranting or raving. It's not going to happen. So go for a walk with them, get the energy moving and purged from the air. So that's the first aid response. It's like breathe, move, then talk. Then there's the longer term stuff that we can help try and troubleshoot this with. So the first P, the antidote to this loss of power piece is, first R is make sure you have good rules in place. What does that mean? So that means because power and autonomy and control are important, when you put boundaries and rules in place in the team, people feel a lot more safe. They understand what the go is. And that could be, and we talked a little bit about this in last session around the structure of your team. Make sure those structures are all in place, your delegation framework, your decision-making process, the limitations for people so they know what scope they have in their job. So people love to have like a scope of responsibility. So make sure that that's clear and identified for them. So putting some black and white containers around this is going to be really helpful for people to feel like, okay, I know this is what I'm working with. This is what my limitations are. And this is what my scope is. Fantastic. So that's the first thing. The second R to help deal with this loss of position piece, that is the storm driver, is recognition. Recognition. So this is all about loss of status and fairness and loss of position. Recognition is a really good, I was going to say cure, it's not necessarily a cure, antidote to that. So letting people know when they're doing something amazing or even just well, if they're not used to getting any recognition, is super important. And some people like to do it publicly and some people like to do it privately. So recognition and acknowledgement is really critical here. It can help really tame that storm driver right down. So having a good process for recognition, and it doesn't necessarily mean reward either. It's like recognition. It's like, you did a great job here, is one of the key antidotes here. All right, so this one here, the water bomber, has 2 R's related to it. And the first one is about relationships. Relationships. Oh, good, it fit on the paper. Relationships. Oh, you guys can't see it. Whoop, this way. There we go. When we don't feel safe in the workplace, we can feel very isolated. So our job as leaders is to start to build relationships so that you do things like icebreakers at the beginning of your meetings. You ask questions of people so they get to know each other. There was this great book, and you might be aware of it, called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. And in it, it's this fable of a CEO who comes into a dysfunctional executive team, and she goes, what do I do with this mess? And she goes through a series of initiatives to help them figure out who's who at the zoo and get working together, becoming an elite team. One of the things she did was do a profiling instrument. I think she used Myers-Briggs on them. We talked about that in the last session as well. The second thing she did was took them on offsite and got them to understand and get to know each other as humans. I had one leader say that for 10 years, they sat next to someone right next to them. And only after 10 years in a casual conversation did they find out that their colleague that they've worked with side by side for 10 years had actually arrived in Australia as a refugee from a war-torn country. 10 years, you didn't know this major incident, this major backstory of the person that you work with. Wow. It doesn't mean that you have to give each other a whole like itemized list of all of your ups and downs of your life of the last X amount of years. The point is, like, how much do you know each other as humans? So building relationships is one of your critical leadership capabilities. And for those of us who are more task oriented, it's kind of like, won't this take away from time, energy of delivering on results? Yes. And you'll probably deliver better results as a result. All right, so this is relationships, and the other one is reassurance. So our water bombers are feeling very insecure. So anything you can do to reassure them about their place in the team, that they're respected, they're welcome, they're wanted, they're needed, is super, super important. Because this is a very, very sensitive place to be. And we can experience lack of belonging as a physical pain. There's research around that. It's something that Brene Brown talks about all the time as well, is that we can feel the physical pain of that. So this one's quite sensitive. So this leads to our last P and our last R. And really for this one, the antidote is about regulation. Regulation. What does that mean? It means with performance, people are feeling overwhelmed. They've got too much task, too little time. So you need to get granular with your people to make sure to check what's happening with their workload. Are their deliverables reasonable? Do you have a clear accountability structure to help them, and milestones in order to track progress? Making progress visible is one of the important things that you can do here. So if people feel like they're actually making progress with something, as opposed to just constantly under duress. So having a bit of regulation, having really good key performance indicators is a really important strategy for you right here. All right, let me just check the chat box. I haven't missed any questions for people. Nope, looks like we're all good.
Can I be so bold as to ask a question rather than type it?
Whoa, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Could you speak up a little?
Can I be so bold as to ask a question rather than type it?
Oh, okay, go for it, yeah.
With the loss of place with your water bomber, can you just take me further in terms of what you mean by place in terms of, because there's not status. Status is sitting in, is it about belonging? Is it about, just unpack it a bit more for me?
Yeah, it's exactly what you just said. It's about belonging. So they don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like they're part of the group. They don't feel safe in the team. Maybe they've been ignored, maybe they've been ostracized, maybe they've been isolated. So these are quite a bit different than status and fairness, which is all about, recognizing my experience and expertise and getting fair piece of the pie. So the belonging, it's the belongingness piece. So yeah, good question. All right. So I promised you a superpower. So in order to deal with this mess, these poor devils, we need to be calm and centered ourselves, right? And this is so important because how we show up does have a ripple effect. It is like blasting it like a megaphone. And if we're having a bad day, oh, don't you know it, our teams know it. So they've got peripheral vision on the leader all the time. And this is a tribal thing. So that when we were in caves, we always had our eye on the alpha, because the alpha leader was always responsible. That was the leadership contract, responsible for our safety and well-being. So if the leader was relaxed, we knew that we were safe. If the leader was like on high alert, whoo, the tribe was threatened. So this has come down through the generations for us. And we always have this sort of peripheral attention on what the leader is doing and saying and how they're showing up. So if they're showing up chilled, then we know, okay, things are under control. If they show up like, oh, same thing, we know that there's drama on hand. So monitoring ourselves, managing ourselves is so important to help calm the horses, if you like, and also good for our own emotional resilience. So let's go into my key top tip for this superpower of presence. Because when you're calm and centered, woo, you have presence. And it's called Nose, Toes, and Pose. I wrote about this in, I think, my second book, Moments. In any case, let's go through it. Nose is your first biohack, and it's breathing. So breathing will access your rest and digest, your calm down facility. So breathing evenly and regularly through the heart area. This has been shown by other research to help synchronize your heartbeats so it's not so frenetic and chaotic. And so when we breathe evenly and regularly, imagining it going through the heart area, it just trains our heart regulation, our heart rate variability to be even and smooth. And that energetic impulse goes out into the ethos and has an effect on the people around us. So breathing doesn't even have to be deeply, just regularly and evenly. Same cadence, in and out, whatever pace it is for you. So that's the nose part. Toes, whether you're sitting or standing, dig your toes into the ground. Dig your toes in. And what that does is it anchors you in your body in the present moment. So when you're anchored in your body in the present moment, you're not catastrophizing about what's going on or what could happen or what did happen. You're just like here now. Nose, breathing regularly and evenly through the heart, toes digging in. And pose, I'm pretty sure many of you come across this, is doing power poses. So, probably can't see me from outside. Wonder Woman and Superman, which is making yourself into an alpha state, making yourself big. So as you're standing there, feet planted into the ground, toes going. This is another power pose, not very useful in a meeting necessarily. This is another one, again, not useful in a meeting. You can visualize it if you can't do it, but definitely you can sit in a meeting and put your hands on your waist. Even if you can't, because you're tightly packed in, you can still imagine yourself doing this, and you do this for 2 minutes. Amy Cuddy's research, if you're not familiar with it, Google it. She has a great TED Talk, 18-minute TED Talk on if you can fake it to make it. And her whole premise was about checking your biology before and after power poses. And her research shows it boosts your testosterone, men and women's, which is your assertiveness hormone, and lowers your cortisol and adrenaline. So all of your micro cues going out to the people that you interact with are saying, I'm confident, I'm stoic, I'm in control. So you're doing nose breathing, which regulates your heartbeat and your heart rate variability and the impulses, your electromagnetic field. You're doing toes to anchor you in the present moment, and pose to downregulate your fight and flight system. That is your superhero superpower. And it's all about presence. If you do this for 2 minutes before any meeting, ooh, you're gonna rock that show. I counseled one of my CEOs today who has to go into an exit interview tomorrow for one of her team members who's been basically a firebug and storm driver, sort of vacillating between the two. And the exit interview is all about, I just want to have my say about how crap things are. And she's like, okay. So she knows that's what she's going into. She just has to listen. It's an exit interview. So I'm like, nose, toes, and pose. Let's do. That's what you got to do. Breathe and be there. Be the place, the safe place that people can be what they need to be. And what you'll find as you're doing this regularly, you'll be so powerful and resonant that people's systems will regulate evenly around you too. All right, that's nose, toes, and pose. Cool. If you've been doing this as I've been talking, you should feel really good right now. I feel amazing. Nose, toes, and pose. Yeah, it's a complete winner. 2 minutes, that's all you need. All right. So keeping the vibe alive, six, there we go, not 4, 6 questions you can ask yourself to help maintain the mojo. So you've troubleshooted all the 4 devils, you got yourself set up for that. You're working on your capabilities so you become an amplifier. Yeah, how do you keep the whole thing song and dance on the happy side of life instead of the woe is me, oh my goodness. Here's 6 questions for you. First one. So thinking about your team, asking yourself, is it fun? If it ain't fun, do something to make it more fun. And fun is a really big contributor to team morale. And it doesn't mean you have to have mandated fun, like, oh, right, we're doing team bowling and you must go. Like that's mandated fun. It can be simple. It can be simple banter on your intranet. It can be share a joke of the day type of thing. That kind of stuff, just adding a little bit of levity is super important. It could be recommending funny videos. So one of the things I did when lockdown first happened last year, I came across this amazing YouTube channel called Honest Trailers, Honest Movie Trailers. If you haven't come across it, you're welcome. Go and enjoy. Go onto Honest Movie Trailers and plug in your favorite movie and have them do an honest review of you. It's hilarious. Okay, so is it fun is the first question. Number 2, is it meaningful? Is what we're doing meaningful? Meaningful. And if it ain't, why are you doing it? That's a soul-searching one, isn't it? Is it meaningful? Number 3, and I mentioned this already in relationship to regulation, is progress visible? Making progress visible is as simple as a to-do list made public where you can tick things off. It could be a Gantt chart where you're tracking progress. It could be a thermometer if you're doing fundraising so you can always see how things are going. It could be, and I'm not necessarily advocating this, a box of Tim Tams. That's a progress bar, right? So when you have 2 gone, there's 6 left, you can't help but eat the rest. You cannot leave a single Tim Tam in that box. It's against the rules. So you absolutely need to finish off the last one. So progress bars are useful because they motivate us to go to the end. It's like we want to see that thermometer go to the top. We want to see things finished off. It's like that nice dopamine hit. All right, so that's number 3. Number 4, are we growing as humans? Again, it's a bit of a philosophical one. So we've gone from practical to philosophical. Are we growing? And if we're not growing, how can we do this? Number 5, and this speaks more to the people dynamics, is do we like each other? And if we don't like each other, you're not being curious enough, because you will find something amazing about even the people who make you go initially. There's something amazing about them that you just haven't discovered yet. So do we like each other is another one that we can actually dig into a little bit. And the number 6 comes back full circle to the first one a little bit, which is, when was the last time we did something fun together? So these like 6 easy, simple questions, you're like, yeah, duh, these are obvious. Do you do them? When was the last time you checked in on them? And when there is so much else going on, just in terms of managing logistics and having to reshuffle plans, it's easy for this stuff to go off by the wayside. So those are 6 really important questions that you can use to help keep the vibe alive. 2 other things to help you make the shift from achiever to amplifier. 1, self-care is non-negotiable. As leaders, it's an enormous pressure that we have on us, and we need you to survive and thrive as leaders, because without leaders, everything falls in a heap. We need people of courage and heart to step up and take stewardship of these amazing organizations in which you operate. Self-care is no longer a nice to have. Absolutely, you need to make sure you're getting enough, all the basics, you know them already, enough sleep, nutrition, exercise, doing something fun for yourself, all that kind of stuff, non-negotiable. And the second thing is community. Community is essential so that you have other leaders to lean on. It's great that you're part of this association where you can tag in with one another and learn from each other and share the ups and the downs of the journey that you're going on. So those are the main things that I wanted to cover off for today. So your superpower, nose, toes, and pose. How to handle the 4 devils. Making sure that you are eking, nudging your way forward and becoming an amplifier, somebody who can navigate complexity and handle the ambiguity. Lastly, my plea to you is to please look after yourself because the world needs you. So I'm going to close. We've got a couple minutes left. Otherwise, I'm going to wish you well and thank you for your participation. So anything you'd like to share or ask, now's the time. Unmute yourself. And before you run away, I'd love to hear what your key takeaway is. You can pop that into the chat box as well to see what was helpful for you, either today or across the whole series. That would be amazing. So if anything, so 2 things, chat box, what was a key takeaway for you? And if there's anything you'd like to know or share, feel free to unmute yourself. Deborah says, I'm an expert at the dark chocolate Tim Tams. You go with that progress bar. Yeah. Connect with each other as leaders. Okay, awesome. I'm glad you found it positive, Megan. I appreciate that. Yeah. All right. So as we're waiting, I might hand it back to Kelly.
Oh, thanks so much, Zoe. My goodness, that was it was an awesome amount, I think, of content and takeaways. So those devils, the 4 devils, I could see myself at different points as a leader in all of those areas, and having people who I entrusted to be leaders in organisations that I've been managing also be those things at the same time I'm being my own things. So I was sitting here, I was watching everyone's faces going, yeah, this is great. Like there's some really good, so I think, self-awareness for us there too. Hopefully everybody found it helpful that every time Zoe gave us a book or something, I quickly popped it in the chat. So please make sure that if there's anything in there before we close off, you click on it and open it up in your internet. So then that way you've got it sitting there ready for you. Zoe, we have just been so happy that you've been a part of the AHI community and helping us learn more about the secrets of elite executive teams. And I can see a few more things popping up in the chat there that people are saying that they've got their key takeaways. So thank you. And for everybody on the call or on our workshop today, we'll have a look with Zoe about some different things that we can keep bringing into our membership and network, because yeah, this has been really, really valuable. Great. So I want to wish you all well. For those in Victoria, we have some restriction reprieve coming tomorrow. For those in New South Wales, you guys hang in there. Yeah, I don't think there's anyone here from South Australia, is there? Do we have any SA people who also, yeah, Joe, of course, that are also experiencing restrictions. So Zoe's superpower there, sorry, not superpower, but just a reminder to have a superpower. And what will help with that is energy. So please look after yourselves, because you can't help others if you can't, you know, be in your A game. So yeah, really take that on board as well. Okay, so without further ado, I think we'll wave goodbye to each other and look out for the recordings, and good luck with your teams, and look after each other.
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it.
Take care, everyone. Bye.